Hello everybody and welcome back. And we have just finished Blizzard Pass, which was a simple one-page map and 2 pages of adventure. We didn't do all of it. I left out a final room here behind a curtain. We were taking Donard out of the cell. I didn't do this area here. It could be good fun. But overall, I thought as a little one-shot dungeon, that was actually quite good. It was actually quite difficult. The rock toads and several of the bandits had quite high armor classes, like 2. We don't really see that very often. And it says here, the party should include 2nd and 3rd level characters of all major classes. Now as you can see, that Donard is back in the party. If you're curious about what happened after we last left our party, it went like this. Everyone picked the weak and barely conscious cleric off the ground and carried him back to the cave. The bandits had some crude barracks of straw beds. They also had a fire pit and some provisions. Carrick got a fire started and Gowan cooked a thin meat stew that could be slowly fed to Donard. They all took turns to nurse him back to consciousness. Then his body was in a good enough state to withstand a cure light wounds. Such a surge of healing still comes with an element of shock to the system. During this time, the party did not investigate the rest of the cave. They all stayed together and kept watch. They heard wolves in the distance. Some came within the cave mouth, but they ran away when the party brandished sticks of fire. Malin was the first to point out that Donard had none of his equipment. When the cleric was fully recovered, they searched the cave for it. The second evil cleric, the junior one, had some of it. Donard recovered his plate mail armour, his shield, and his warhammer, all of which have mild magical enchantments. His potions and the second staff of healing were nowhere to be found. Eventually, they left the cave and set off towards Specularum. It's Malin who asks about Cullen de Filch. Why did Donard travel with him? Donard explains, I was caught by a small group of bandits. Cullen was amongst them. I always thought he was a treacherous wretch. I don't know where they were taking me, but it was northward. Then one night, it was Cullen's turn to watch over me. As I sat there tied and bound, I had a few choice words to say to him. He didn't respond. Instead, he cut my ropes and gave me back my shield and my hammer. Then he whispered that we should run when we could. It turned out that he joined the cutthroats to save his own skin, but didn't like what they were doing. He was looking to get away. I suppose, in a manner, he was using me as a shield to aid his own escape. We did indeed get away. We were not good travelling companions. It didn't take long for us to get caught again. I didn't like him, but his end was wantonly cruel. Malin is itching to ask, why did Donard leave them? But he has been well warned to let that matter alone. Has that little adventure made a change in him? I think so, yes. He's become a bit more quiet, a bit more circumspect, and a little less judgmental. He has a lot to think about. But the other thing about Donard is that he has indeed levelled up. He levelled up at the end of Horror on the Hill with all the dragon treasure that we found. And he will be a level 5 cleric. Now I'm hoping for some good hit points here. Okay. 5. Yes, I'm definitely going with 5. Oh boy, that is good. Remember, he gets a +3 to his constitution bonus. So his hit points go up by 8, which is incredible. He also moves up to level 5, and that means he gets a -2 THAC0 to his hit rolls. He also gets another 2nd level spell. What would that be? I think Bless is a good one. We don't have any buff spells. That or Silence. A Hold Person and a Bless I think will see us through a lot. Okay, what else? Well, we go back to Gowan's village and we drop her off, and then we have to make our way from here to Specularum. Finally, will we stop off at Threshold? No, we're going to avoid the mountains and go straight there. So yes, it is the Veiled Society. Okay, what adventures await us in the big city? Right, and this is the Veiled Society. It takes place in Specularum, and as our party comes south towards the city, they see it rise on several large hills above them, and the main one is topped with a huge palace. The Veiled Society, unlike the other adventures we've just played, it isn't a dungeon crawl. It does have a small dungeon crawl in it, which is this, and it's, well, let's see what it is. I won't spoil it too much, but there really isn't that much to spoil. It's not the largest of modules, and the story isn't that sophisticated. What the selling point of this one was the center pages had flat templates that you could cut, fold up and glue, and you would make little 3D houses and streets. You could actually play with miniatures in little cardboard streets. I did not have those in this PDF, and I have tried to find them online to recreate them, and I couldn't. Oh well, we have our imaginations. Now, what they looked like anyway was, well, now how old is Specularum? Or actually, how old is this Mystara setting? And what would the city look like? Well, what does it not look like? I've seen trailers for Baldur's Gate 3. The introduction video shows the city of Baldur's Gate being trashed by some mind flayers, and that city looks very like Renaissance Italy. It could be Florence or Pisa. Now that would date it in our world to around the 15 to 1600s. I think that is far, far too modern. I looked up the word medieval era, and it seems to span from the year 500 all the way to the year 1500. That's 1000 years. So it's not really appropriate to say that the fantasy world is set in a medieval setting, because the world in the year 500 was not the same as it was 1000 years later. This is a pre-technological era, and there is no gunpowder. Well, I haven't come across any, and gunpowder came to Europe around 1350, so that tells me that this would be set somewhere around the 1200s, which I would consider to be, well, in Northern Europe, the Norman period. Certainly it would be that in Britain and Ireland and in France. And there are a few Norman houses still standing, and they don't look like medieval houses. We associate medieval houses with the black timbers and the whitewashed walls and the little upper floors overhanging. That kind of style is much later on. In fact, if we go back to the player's manual, where we're in the city, you can sort of see in the background here the architecture I was kind of describing with tiled roofs. If that existed, that would be an extremely wealthy house. A lot of things were made of stone if it was available. Also, if we look at the Night's Dark Terror, we go to Threshold here. This is their image of Threshold, and that is very much 16th century. And Threshold itself is a frontier town. It should look more like, well, Wild West America than 16th century Europe. That's just my opinion. By the time that kind of architecture was around, the Spanish tried to invade England with their armada, and that was a massive cannon battle with tons of gunpowder, and we're well before that. So what does the city look like? Stone, mud, straw roofs, tiled roofs for the best people, wooden houses, very narrow streets, no sewerage. I hope that helps set the scene. Now, our party are going to arrive from here, from the north, into Specularum. Now, what does Specularum look like? Well, again, there are two versions. This is the map here, and this is copyrighted to 1984, and Specularum changed, and it looks more like this. This is a very nice map of it. The artist has gone to the trouble of drawing each individual little roof. A lot of them are cut and paste, they're the same building, but there are a lot of unique ones, like a church or a temple or a statue. It's quite a dark map. I don't know if it will show up well on camera, but I really liked it. I would say that the buildings are quite large, and therefore this would be a population of around 5 to 10,000. That was its original population way back in the day. Later on it got upped to 50,000. Here is another map which I have put together from Threshold magazine, issue 21, which specialises in describing Specularum. And it had a lot of districts, and if you put the districts together you get this map here, and it kind of matches many other maps that you find around the place. And you see in this, the buildings are much tinier, they're much tighter together, and the population of this city is reckoned to be about 50,000, and that looks plausible. So we are entering via this north gate here, and the first thing that we're met with is a massive crowds that we can see through the gate, and it is assumed that we're here for the festivities. We didn't know there was going to be festivities, but we can hear over the city walls the sound of music being played and crowds cheering. We are told that when we get to the city gate, the guards ask us to bind our weapons, and they have rolls of linen cloth, and we have to use those to wrap up our swords and our warhammers, and they charge us, well, a silver piece for each. We can easily accommodate that. We also have a pony who's getting a bit agitated at all the crowds. She is a country pony. This is new to her. And of course Liz, who's always wanted to go to the city, her first impression is that every day is a holiday. What we are witnessing is the festival of Lucor. That is where one of the major houses of Specularum leads a parade through the city streets to the harbour with the intention of making an offering. Since the map has changed, I am going to make the parade start at the palace, which is here, go north along these streets, along here to the city wall, down this large street to the harbour, and then it will go all the way back here. It will avoid the bad area, it won't go through here, all the way down beside this city wall, and then through here and back again. And we hit the parade just as it's coming up here, and there are crowds here. This is the city gate, and wow, things kick off. Okay, let's read. Beyond the gate swirls a crowd of people. Mud churned up by the stumbling dancers cakes the crowd's boots. People jostle each other, straining for a look at acrobats, knife throwers, dancing bears, and minstrels. The smells of sewage, grilled meats, breads, sweat, and wine mingle in a strange but inoffensive odour. Suddenly the crowd sways to the sides of the street. The music fades and changes to bells and chanting. Statues carried by several men seem to float above the heads of the crowd. A sedan chair borne on the shoulders of clerics follows. "The procession is coming," shouts a young boy. Now there is a woman leading this procession. We may find out later what her name is, but it is Lady Magda of the Tauronescu faction. This year is the Tauronescu's turn to lead the procession. The procession stops, and something is happening at its front. 3 men are arguing. A general hush falls over the crowd as everyone moves back from the procession. 2 men, one small, plump and pockmarked, and the other tall, lean, are arguing with the lead bearer of the sedan chair. Angrily, the small plump man says to the lead bearer, "Bald-headed fool, do you Tauronescu think you own the street? There's space for all of us without your ape-like behaviour." The lead bearer contemptuously waves a rod in the small man's face. Out of the way of the procession of Lucor Radu rubble, the tall lean man, spitting on the statue of Lucor, says, "That old fool, you make me laugh." The lead bearer strikes the tall man, knocking him to the filth. The smaller man tenses, ready to lunge. Right, we can act however we want. We can watch, or we can get involved. And I'm sure there are some people playing this who would take the opportunity to get involved, and the module tells you what happens when your party do that. We aren't going to do that. We're going to let this fight play out. we're going to let the procession go on its way, and we're going to ask a local person, what was that all about? And they just say, oh, it's the Toronescus and the Radu families fighting again. You know, their nobility, they're always fighting amongst each other. Doesn't affect us really, does it? It's not a 2-mile long procession. It's probably this long, and it takes about 5 minutes as they walk slowly to the beat of the music to go round here. And it passes by, and well, we're in a very busy city. The streets are lined with people here for the festival. There are food vendors, hawkers all over the place. Well, what an introduction to the city, and we need to find somewhere to stay. Well, after learning about that little introduction into the politics of the nobility, our party decide to see more of the city. What a day to arrive on, in the middle of a festival. And indeed, as I've said, Liz thinks, well, it must be like this every day. This green area is called the Merchants District, and as you can imagine, every street here is lined with shops and stores selling everything. If you can't buy it here, you can't buy it anywhere. And business is good because this place is thronged with not just the city folk, but all visitors who come for the festival. While it seems exciting for some, it actually becomes a bit unpleasant and crowded for others. Once the festival is past, then people are able to spill onto the street and it becomes very busy. They very quickly lose Malin in what claims to be a magic shop that claims to sell magical items, and after looking around and calling his name for 2 minutes, they find him there and drag him out and remind him that this isn't Threshold. It's very easy to get lost here. And indeed, for different reasons, Liz and Malin are country folk in a big city. Even Sylvia feels out of place. Donard has been in big cities before, even in foreign lands, but he doesn't like them. And Carrick is used to large busy settlements. The dwarven settlements tend to be well organised, with avenues and stairways and tunnels going off at right angles in straight lines, with doors off them at regular intervals, and it all makes sense. This just looks like chaos. The first thing they need to do is try and find somewhere to stay, and it doesn't matter what tavern they stop at, their answer they're given is, sorry, we're fully booked. And it becomes quite disheartening. In fact, they probably get to here when Donard says, listen, shall we just leave this place? Nobody else agrees to that. It's taken them so long to get here, and they've travelled for many days. In fact, an inn just to rest up seems to be a priority. Liz once fancied that she might bump into her friend. She had a friend who years ago came here to live the big life, and she got a job as a barmaid. And if you remember, she's still a barmaid. And Liz wonders, will she bump into her old friend? But it soon becomes apparent that there are just taverns everywhere. They don't have rooms to stay, they're just drinking houses. Sylvia is an elf, Carrick is a dwarf. They feel kind of foreign. Donard doesn't want to speak to anybody. As they walk through, it's up to Liz and Malin to ask any of the shopkeepers, do you know where there's an inn? And the answer seems to be, there's hundreds of inns, but they're all full, and somebody eventually recommends we try the Old Quarter. If you look at this map, there's a brown area here, but there's a slightly paler version here. This is called the Nest. Both of these are part of the old part of the city, but the Nest is the slums. This is where you go to get your throat cut, or else you go to find somebody who wants to cut somebody else's throat. This is the Old Quarter, and this large building is the Church of Traladara. And eventually the party make it down this street between what is called Bricktop. This is a nice part of town. It isn't the wealthy nobility area, but it's certainly for those who have more money than most. Maybe this is where the wealthiest of the merchants live. But they come down this street, they're well away from the festival, it gets a bit easier, things are looking up. The Old Quarter as a section looks like this, and the party are... Let's see if I can map the two onto each other. Yes, you can see this street here is the equivalent of this, and we've come down here. So we're walking through Bricktop, looks quite nice, gets a bit dingier again as the buildings become older. But we see an inn. We tried this building here, no luck. Malin comes out blushing. He asks for rooms. That's called the Fishbowl Brothel. Okay, so that didn't work out too well. Right. We come down here and we find an inn here, and that is called the Splintered Diamond Inn, and it happens to have a private room with 2 beds, and the innkeeper says that's all it will have, and they give us the advice that you probably won't find room for 5, you might each have to find your own inn. So we're going to deposit Sylvia and Liz, and it's actually quite a nice place compared to the hustle and bustle and the smell of outside. In fact, when they go upstairs to look at their room, they're actually pleasantly surprised and are more than happy to stay here. And they have behind it a stable for the pony, and that is probably the biggest asset. Space here is extremely tight, and if you look at this building here, there's a little white square beside it. That's the stables. So they dump their bags and their satchels, but they don't want to lose track of where the boys are going, so they remember where their inn is, and they follow down to the next street. We pass by a tavern on the corner, and this key says tavern times several, and indeed every building marked 34 is just a drinking hole, and as I said, there are hundreds of these over the city. And we come to another inn, and we ask at this place. They have a room for 4. There's one person who's taken up a bed, and the landlord will offer the 3 other beds to Malin, Donard and Carrick. And they go upstairs, and this inn is called the Duke's League Inn, and it again is fairly decent. The guys go upstairs, dump their bags. Each room has a trunk or a chest at the end of its bed for you to stash your stuff, and each one also comes with a padlock and a key, and it looks like the padlock on the 4th bed has already been locked. So whoever the 4th person is in this room, they've booked their room and they're somewhere in the city, and maybe come the evening we'll get to meet who they are. But Liz and Sylvia realise with good luck the guys are just down the street, so they go back to their inn and have a rest. We are knackered. It's in the afternoon, we're going to have a nap and then get ready to go into the city during the evening and to see what things are like there. And that is our first foray into Specularum. Right, I'm going to finish this session with a bit of continuity from the Horror on Hill and the Keep on the Borderlands. If you remember, we put our money into the bank in the Keep and they wrote letters of credit, which we have, and if we find the bank here, we can give those letters of credit to the bank and they will either give us the money in cash or hold it for us. And also the Castellan of the Keep was going to forward more letters to the bank as our reward for rescuing Guido's fort from the Hobgoblin raid. And after we have our afternoon nap, we go to the bank. Luckily the letters have the address of the bank, so it's easy to ask for the street and to find it. So that's what we do. Turns out that the letters of credit from the Castellan did arrive at the bank. The clerk fetches them and gives them to us, and it turns out they're worth 300 gold pieces each. So what we're going to do is we're going to add that to our own credit and put in all of our dragon stash from the Horror on the Hill, plus other treasures. So we have got quite a large bank account each, and I think we'll take out 50 gold pieces and 50 silver pieces each, just to keep us in the city for a week. And well, of course, unbeknownst to the party, things are going to kick off, and all that will happen next time. So I'll see you then.